Sorry about that. I fucked up. I accidentally closed the timer that puts the text on the screen. Then I didn't know how long we had to go. And then I asked for a drink and I don't know what's happening. So I'm just waiting for my drink. But just give me 1 second. Messed it up. Whatever. Everyone fucks up on live streams. Why am I held to a higher standard than like 99% of streamers? Fucking hell. My son is getting me a drink. That's the benefit of school holidays. You don't want to be on camera.
I love you so much.
Yeah.
I hope you have a really good stream.
Oh, fuck off. Okay. Close the door.
Bye, bestie. I love you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
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 Love you. Have a good stream.
Okay, that's enough. Love you. All right. All right, so we'll start. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me move this back. Seems to be a bit. There we go. Now let me know if there's an echo. I've had a bit of problem with the sound lately because I've had a new setup and stuff, but we'll be all right. And also, audio bros, when I say let me know if the sound is bad, I don't mean let me know if the sound isn't perfect. You know what I mean. I mean, let me know if it's intolerable, like there's noise or echo. Okay. Fucking hell. I should never invite that shit on the internet. There's always someone. Anyway, because what I've got is a video about Pauline Hanson talking about stuff and the mess, you know, of course, let's talk about the tech and the lighting and the audio rather than the issue. Anyway, afternoon. So, I'll start from the beginning, but I'm also just going to start it with a rhetorical question, which is, do the left want to win? Do we want to win? And I suppose if you've been following my streams for any length of time, you'll know that I don't believe that woke Twitter journos necessarily constitute the left wing of politics. I'm a political scientist. By every metric, they're not. But let's do a thought experiment and be charitable and assume that these people think that they are fighting for social justice. Okay. Do they want to win? Seriously, so I'm talking about Pauline Hanson today, even though I wouldn't want to give this a platform or defend any of this because that would make me a white supremacist. Obviously. But what I'm going to do is also remind people a little bit about our political history. And what I'm going to do is ask the question over and over again. Does the left actually want to win? If you're on the left, what the fuck are you doing? Okay. Now, most of the children who enjoy cancelling people weren't around in 2001, or they were very little, okay? Or they were hanging at the fucking uni bar when they were supposed to be reading the fucking details and theoretical details of that fucking arts degree that somehow has waltzed them into a job where at Triple J and fucking ABC and all these outlets where they seemingly think that they got there because they deserve it. But they were in the uni bar while I was working, but still doing the work at uni. These guys haven't read this shit. All these people that are supposed experts on fascism don't fucking understand it, do they? They don't know how it works. What fascism is, and the most unique thing about fascism. This is important, okay? I'm not trying to be snarly because I understand how when you're having a go at snooty cunts, me talking down to them could be perceived as elitist, a different form. Nah, I just think you're stupid and reckless and likely going to cost, any viable opposition to the Conservative government the fucking election, okay, with this bullshit. What people don't know about fascism is that why it is effective is because it taps into the sentiment of the working class that Marx talked about, predicted, all of this stuff. Fascism exploits revolutionary energy and turns it away from the good issues and turns it towards minorities and groups and outgroups. Okay, that is what fascism does. But what it also does is that it creates an other. Okay, let me go back. So fascism, okay, is populist. Okay, so one of the earmarks of populism is a sort of us, ordinary people versus the elites. So ruling for the people, the everyday person. Okay, now you can have left populism, you can have right populism. Now, right populism is largely a big part of fascism. It's a bit more complex than that, but I think people really need to get clear on what terms they're using. If you're calling something far right or calling something fascistic or calling it what it is, which most people don't know what this is, but also that there's a whole social psychology component to this. There's a behavioral component to this. There is a counterintuitive aspect to a lot of this politics. And I've been studying this for a long time. I still to this day can't tell whether these people are literally double agents, like literally paid by the Conservatives to implode and undermine the left and hand the election, or whether they're just fucking idiots. I'm just going to assume they don't know. I'm going to have to assume that they're stupid rather than being evil, because I think that's, Hanlon's law, it's more likely, right? They're rich kids who don't know what they're talking about, who are used as weapons, who hand the election to the very people that they think they're fighting. That's what we're dealing with right now. And this let's start with Pauline Hanson. An interesting figure, a complex figure, okay? A very interesting pawn, okay, in the Australian political system, okay? Which is, again, you need to understand the Australian political culture, but I'll try to be as quickly and I'll try to be concise, right? I'm never concise. As concise as I can be, which is still not very concise. But we get there. Which is, okay, so Pauline Hanson appeared in sort of the 90s, okay? And what she did was she tapped into a sentiment. So this disillusionment that happened, this is a long history. So Australia sort of hitched its wagon to globalism, okay, to globalization. And so we had the recession, and we had a sudden surge in sort of 18, like the mortgage interest rates went up like to 18%, I think at one point, okay. So through the Keating government's economic policy and hitching our wagon to America, and also to Asia. So Paul Keating talking a lot about sort of the Asian market and the importance of sort of building relationships with Southeast Asia. Because up until then, Australia was sort of insular. Okay, so we engaged in trade, but we were sort of protectionist. Okay, but we went full into this globalization, economic rationalism. Floated the currency. And we basically had a recession. And so Labor the history there is that, a decade before that is that there's a rich history there, but you've got to understand this history to understand what happens with Pauline Hanson and why you hand the election to the Conservatives every time you do this shit, okay? And I'm going to talk about Tampa, I'm going to talk about 2001, I'm going to talk about wedge politics and how we are falling for the same trap, and it's going to happen again, and I have a feeling that it's going to be the same fucking bullshit, okay? Critical theory is the Tampa of 2021. Okay, we're waiting for an election announcement. Morrison thinks he's a dead man walking, but my point is, John Howard won the unwinnable election in 2001 using this exact template, and it's likely to work. Okay, and I'm going to tell you why. And this worries me because I have tried Again, I'm not an active member of the ALP, mostly because of all of the gender stuff, and I don't want that shit in my life. And I also don't want to bring down a party. I don't want to cause any division. I don't want to start a shit fight with loonies, and I'm focused on the end goal, which is, getting rid of the coalition government. And if that means me not participating, then I won't do it. Okay. I'll do bits behind the scenes. So, but this is just something that I'm writing an essay at the moment. I started that Twitter thread yesterday on like the ALP and how they're like, this is how you win in a landslide and this is how you lose in a landslide, is understanding the digital landscape with this stuff. Because they didn't before, and I don't think they do now. I'm worried. Okay. But so in the 70s, Gough Whitlam was elected. Now I'm giving a very quick history here. Broad sweeping changes: free university, free healthcare, Medicare, all of those sort of broad sweeping, very social democratic policies. And this was, popular, and sort of it's still very, it's been gradually eroded over the years, right? But that was a pinnacle in Australian politics, and then but he actually got so Gough Whitlam, the Prime Minister, introduced, there's a lot of theory here, so I'm just going to be very quick. Gough Whitlam introduced universal healthcare, free education, tertiary education, so you could just go to university and for free. It was, whatever. And you would then, but basically what happened was he then got dismissed by the Governor General for the first time in Australian history. It's called a constitutional crisis at the time. Okay. So he couldn't get the spending bill through the Senate. And basically the Governor General stepped in, our Parliament was deadlocked, and our Prime Minister was sacked. Okay. Now, what happened after that? We still, we still have some of the relic of that left. So what happened was then you had the new government, okay, and then you had Bob Hawke. Okay, Bob Hawke then, a union guy, brought in things like workers, the Accord, which is basic workers' rights, unions, awards, all of that sort of stuff. So really fighting for really good social democratic policy. And they've been fought tooth and nail the whole time. Now, Bob Hawke was then overridden. This is a very quick and complicated history, but I'm not giving it the justice that it needs, but I'm giving you a little bit of, again, the events really dictate the story. Okay, they tell you the story. So, so then Paul Keating took over. Okay, now with Paul Keating, all of this stuff came in. So he started being a bit more economic rationalist. He was a bit more right wing, bit more, embracing this sort of third way stuff, again, ties with America, that very international focus. Okay. Then we had a massive recession, okay, where housing prices went up by, housing prices didn't go up. So Australia had a good life. We had a good life, okay, that generation, which, my mother's generation, where, housing was relatively accessible. Interest rates were low. You could actually purchase a house. If you had a full-time job, you could purchase a house. If you left school in year 10, you could just go into a job, learn on the job, become a trade, all that sort of stuff. But over time, this is the thing about the difference between something like the UK or America, is that we once had a taste of what social democracy looked like. Okay, we've actually had that. And what's happened is that we've been, gradually chipped away over time. Now, so then you had the Keating government, who were sort of, on this, okay, well, it's, we had this massive, so it's very important that you understand in the 90s that there was a massive recession, and that there was a middle class who lost a lot, that lost their houses, their interest rates went up, they were squeezed, there was mass unemployment, there was a big recession, okay? And that's quite an economic shock. Now, a lot of this stuff has sort of teetered and it's always been looming over the Labor Party since. So the Labor Party, the one thing that the Conservatives have always been good at in history is the wedge, and that's what I'm going to talk about, is tapping into sentiment and tapping into who and is misdirecting blame, is tapping into that emotional, like, because there's a rational, cynical aspect. There's that sort of rational, it's based on rational choice theory. Conservatism is fundamentally an assumption that we're all rational, that we all, dog eat dog, whatever. So what they'll do is they're just better at this better at, I was thinking of psyops and psychology and I stumbled. But they're better at the psychological aspects of campaigning than the left, because left tend to be more, it's a blind spot that's constantly exploited, and it actually comes down to fundamental differences in the way that, the psychology of politics. And this is why when I look at the psychology of these fucking people with blue checks and all those people, I go, well, you don't even fit the personality profile for the left. You actually just, because you're a manipulator. Anyway. So again, these are big, broad brushstrokes and very complex history, and I have definitely misspoken on these things. But the history of that is that in the 90s, you had a lot of working class, middle class resentment, especially around people who were working in trades, because what happened was, through globalization, through the gradual privatization of universities, which is something that is a key part of history in terms of how Australia embraced US-style shit, okay? Because remember, at the time, the United States were, like, actually doing okay. Most of what we see today was predictable, but it wasn't something that, at one point, the United States was something worth looking up to politically, rather than a fucking dumpster fire, right? It's only really people who sort of understand where history leads that it's like, okay, well, it's going there. But at the time, so we sort of embraced this stuff, but also don't forget that there's a cultural aspect to this, where Australia's always been that sort of cultural underdog, and we always sort of looked up and sucked up to the Americans and always felt like we weren't enough as Australia. And when Americans took interest in, showed interest in us, it was always that sort of, Hulk Hogan or Olivia Newton-John or, it was always that superficial stuff. We were always like a little toy to the Americans. We always have been. I get treated like a fucking toy by these, intellectuals that I'm smarter than all the time, right? Just because I don't say it the right way or the polite way or, their way, that somehow, what I do isn't valid, which for me, it's like, well, no, I'm trying to reach a different type of audience. Okay. So anyway, but the key, so what happened was there was a switch, okay, in the late 90s with Paul Keating. Now, I liked Paul Keating. He was funny, but there's a legacy of that, where over time, sort of conservative politics, economic rationalism, privatization of public utilities, over time, this is over decades, was chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And the Liberal Party are conservatives here, otherwise known as the coalition. So it's not even a minority, it's not even a majority. So in Australia, you've got the Labor Party, okay, who are actually like the largest party, always get more votes than the Liberal Party. But the Liberal Party have a coalition with the National Party, and those two join up, and that reaches roughly sort of 50-50, depending on where the needle goes, okay? Again, that's federally, we'll, not seat by seat, whatever. So basically, so in that time, so there's a lot of resentment there already with tradies, where a lot of their, one of the funny jokes here is that you can't even pour a beer without getting a fucking cert from TAFE anymore. You have to go to train to learn how to polish, like clean a table, that's that sort of certification of trades. There's a lot of resentment there, because in my parents' generation particularly, that was a way, because, university was an elite thing. It was an elite system. It was something that, because it was free, you had to earn and you had to get there. It wasn't just something you could buy your way into. It was something you had to earn. And there was that real class division there about, but tradies actually, you could leave school in year 10. If school wasn't for you, you could go get a job. You could work as an apprentice. But now, instead, if you left school at 15, you'd have to go into school again in order to, before you got the job. They forced this sort of on you, okay? We also had a very strong social security system with, training and, so if you were disadvantaged or had any sort of disadvantage. Again, it wasn't perfect, but better than it was. But again, it's just that kind of simmering resentment. So that's something that you need to understand with Australia, is that it wasn't a lollipop that we never had. It was a lollipop that we were given and then was taken away from us over time. Okay, so it's very different psychology, as you know, which is that when you have a taste of something and it's taken away, that's much worse than it existing as something that's not possible. So that's at the, historically speaking, that's relevant to what happened with Pauline Hanson. So Pauline Hanson came out at that time, okay, off the back of resentment towards Keating, Mabo, which was a High Court decision where we apologised to where there was a native title, I won't talk about that too much, but dispossessed Aboriginal people. The Mabo decision in 1992 acknowledged that Indigenous people were the original owners of the Australian land, and that there would be that they would be able to make a legal claim to some property. Okay, so that was like a landmark decision, which informs a lot of policy today. So there was resentment about that. Okay, again, when it's not so much about. I think everything is complex, and sometimes when you just look at key events, it starts to tell you this is why psychologists and social workers, this is why they get the family history and they get the events, because sometimes when you just look at events, okay, now I'm not saying that stuff's not left out here. I'm saying that, this is broadly what happened, okay, which is that you've got a combination of things. Privatization of universities. So from my point of view, the generation that got free education, they had housing, they had a good system, they had jobs, they had a future, okay? They got into power, and what happened was they then changed all of the laws so that I have $100,000 in university debt, can't buy a house, all of these sorts of things, okay? Health insurance, privatized health insurance. And so, that generationally, that's really where we're at. So in 1996, I believe, 97-ish, I think it was end of 97, if I'm not mistaken. End of 96. Sorry, my dates aren't good, but the overall pattern's there. John Howard was elected, okay? Now, he's a savvy operator and got himself elected off the back of sentiment and, anti-Keating sentiment. People were mad at the Labor Party. They run with the narrative that Labor were poor economic managers. They ran on the idea that they were running the country into the ground. And look, you can't afford a house. Look, the interest rates are up. It's obviously not that simple. It was, it's a recession. Recessions happen. But at the same time, that they hit the pain point. Okay? They hit the nerve. And this is what wedge politics does, is that they hit that nerve. And this is something that the ALP fail to do. They fail to do it every time, and I see it happen. It's a blind spot, and it's just going to happen again. So Pauline Hanson was elected to the seat of Oxley, okay, in Queensland. So that's a federal seat. So in the parliament, you've got, a federal seat. She was elected as a lower house member to the seat of Oxley in Queensland. Now, that's a sort of semi-outlying area of Queensland, which is kind of, that sort of, the word bogan, okay? It's a bit of a bogan area, that sort of stuff. Again, working class, right? Working class area. The thing about working class areas is that they are diverse, okay? And people are going to do that. They're going to see, the world change around them. Foreigners start to move in. They can't afford a house. They can't get a job, even though these are actually policies that are independent of immigration. What they're going to do, because they don't know about the policy, is that they're going to see, again, this is why looking at things through other people's eyes and not projecting your own ideas onto things. You go, okay, the data that they take in, much like the Labor Party's data on these issues, is wrong. It's incorrect. It's incomplete data. Okay, their decisions are rational based on what they see. Okay, which is that if you are working class and you haven't had access to education, you're seeing the world change. You're building a correlation based on data that you've seen okay? And you're forming a picture that demonizes the people that are getting their house, the state housing. You're seeing that, that Indigenous people might be, getting some slightly different payments to you, getting a bit more money. You might see them not dispossessed and not working and not understanding all of that stuff. You'll see immigrants moving in. You'll see, all these things. Again, it's just people who are gathering data. They build these heuristics, they build these schemas, and they kind of jump to the wrong conclusion. Now, that's what happens in politics, and this is why it's such a cynical grab for power when you demonize somebody like Pauline Hanson, and you don't see, and also when you see political figures not that you see everything that people make as symptoms of bigger problems and just demonize them, you're feeding the same beast. So I don't know if the words came out right then, but we'll go anyway. So John Howard was elected, but you had one independent federal person. And she was Pauline Hanson, the seat of Oxley in Queensland. She owned a fish and chip shop, okay? She's a redhead, okay? She got elected off the back of this sentiment, which was people in Ipswich and Oxley. She owned a fish and chip shop in Oxley, small business owner, okay? She saw the community change around her, okay? The people voted for her as a local person who claimed to, anyway, she got kicked out of the Liberal Party for saying that she thought that it was unfair that Aboriginal people got benefits and stuff, right? She's a very interesting figure if you sort of detach from the ideology. Detaching from ideology is generally good. If you analyse the situation and look at the history, she's an interesting figure. She's kind of pre-Trump in an Australian sense, right? It's that same sentiment. It's that anger. People displace their anger on they project, right? So, they displace. So she got elected as an independent in a federal seat. Now, that gives you power in a government, because what that means is that they then need to appeal to your base and vote. Her getting elected was a gross thing. So this is the thing about where the reaction actually unintentionally feeds the problem that they're trying to fight. And so what happened was that there was a media furor from her first of all, from her getting elected, but second of all, her maiden speech, which was notorious. Okay, it's very famous, where she said, "We're being swamped by Asians." Okay, remember it was the 90s, so it was the Asians, right? And this is the role that the media play in this stuff. Guess what they did? They fucking put it everywhere, played it everywhere. And guess what happened? All of the people who agreed with her in Australia, all over Australia, went, "Oh, who's this person? I like the way she thinks. I'm angry too. They're taking my jobs. They're taking my house. I fucking can't get, all these fucking uni pricks who got everything for free." Because again, there's that sentiment that, there's real work and not real work, and that university is not, knowledge isn't valuable unless, again, it's this ideological imperative, which is that education and knowledge is only valuable if you earn money from it, okay, which is bullshit, okay. It has its own inherent worth. And if you look at any university course, you'll see how different it is now. You can't even get a non-commercially oriented postgrad degree anymore without a lot of debt. It's only a tool of the rich now, and it's just commercialized, which is weird because postgrad basically became trades, so it's very strange. But anyway, but that sentiment, so tapping into that sentiment, the media could have just left it alone and ignored it. It was on Hansard. If someone wanted to find it, then they could find it. But again, the role that they played was that they amplified her voice. Okay, now this is part of the criticism about giving Pauline Hanson airtime. But you need to understand the history of how Pauline Hanson has been used by the coalition over the years in order to exploit that sentiment, not address the issues that cause that sentiment, but exploit that sentiment in order to push, further and further and further to the right. And sort of that same thing in the United States with the ratchet effect. It's a very similar thing, which is that pushing everybody to the right by wedging the Labor Party and using this poor economic management thing against them since the recession years of Keating. Okay. And that puts them on the back foot. Always. Defensive. It fucks them up. Freaks them out. Own it. Stand up to them. You fucking hell. Anyway. So 1996 onwards, those years were very fraught, okay? Because what we saw was Pauline Hanson rising in popularity. Now, if you don't know, here's a picture. Here's a picture of Pauline Hanson. So she was a spectacle at the time, okay? Wrapping herself, she owned it. Wrapping herself in the flag, dressing sort of that, that new rich sort of styling, wearing, inappropriately sexual clothing, position, everything that she did, she positioned herself against sort of the family, the upper middle class, right? And that's what, again, that's how, again, I don't even know if she's a fascist. I think she's just used by them, right? Again, I think she's just a fucking working class racist. If anyone has that kind of family, it's like, it's not, I don't know, it's just wrong-headedness. I don't know if it's necessarily malicious. Fascism is quite unique in that it's it's a unique thing, and it's not a word that really should be used lightly. But let's just use that for economy. So basically, so she was sort of gaudy, she was tacky, she was sort of everything that, but what that did was it positioned her very clearly early on as one of us, okay? Not the city people, okay, first of all. Not the rich, not the ABC journalists who looked down on her, okay? So there were a bunch of interviews as well where she was interviewed, and basically one of the journalists famously said about the word xenophobia. Okay, they raised the word xenophobia, and she paused and she went, please explain, okay? Because she didn't know what xenophobia meant, okay? So they kind of did the same grilling, the same fucking shit that they did with Trump. And this is when I say, does the left want to win? Because this is exactly how they don't win. And I know because history tells us this, okay, which is that it's kind of a counterintuitive thing. So what happened was the media then decided to mock her, okay? The elites, okay, started to make fun of her. They started to vilify her, okay? And what happened was that every Australian who was angry, and rightfully so, okay, not at the right people, but for the right reasons, they related to that. They were sick of being humiliated. They were sick of being talked down to, because there also used to be, there's this strange thing. It's still there, and I've had to pull my head in too on this, which is that if you go to university that you're better than everyone else. I've talked about this. That's just something that we're told. But TAFE students are sort of, vocational people like that are always sort of taught that they're less than somehow. So they're already raised with that chip, right? So it's kind of a weird revolutionary brewing of just put in the wrong direction. And that's what fascism exploits, is what would ordinarily be revolutionary energy onto groups of people that because they've got bad data, okay, bad information. So again, none of this is wrong-headed. It's not a conspiracy to shut her down until you make it a fucking conspiracy. So basically what happened in 1996, she's an independent sitting in Parliament, okay? She's a fucking boil on the ass of the coalition, and she's definitely a boil on the ass of Labor. She's dominating the conversation, and what Pauline Hanson did was give voice to a bunch of anger and sentiment and also racism and outrage and all those horrible bad thoughts, because she was an ordinary person, not necessarily I think she's actually kind of softened the edges a little bit now, and she's a bit more savvy, but she also had bad people around her and all that sort of stuff. But she became unwittingly, wittingly, whatever you want to say, is she became the voice of a lot of discontentment politically in the late 90s. Now, in the 2001 election, and this is what's important, in the shadow of 9/11, okay, in the shadow of this, remember the Afghanistan war, trying to manufacture consent for that lie, okay, Pauline Hanson being elected, knowing that, and her rising popularity, like there's stuff that she was at roughly 10, at her peak, it was about 10% of all of the population, okay? So that was a massive, massive vote, okay? That's a massive voting block, okay? And again, this is the woman thing. This is the anti-woke thing all over again. You're alienating and ignoring an entire voting block of people with no fucking understanding of the impact of this, which is how it's used, which is that what happened was, so Pauline Hanson, with her 10% of the vote, started to become quite powerful. But they didn't want her to have any power because she's actually, working class, right? We can't have that. So what the Liberals did, again, coalition, conservative government in Australia, is that there was an incident, it was awful, okay, the Tampa incident, around election time, and it was called the Children Overboard Affair. If you were alive and not a child who suddenly has a hot take on this on Twitter and a blue check, you would remember the Children Overboard Affair. And that was used cynically by John Howard, okay, cleverly. If you're pure from a pure political persuasion angle, if you look at it, you go, that was fucking brilliant, okay? And that was the thing, is that I can concede that people that I hate are really good at these things, and John Howard was an extremely, extremely savvy political campaigner, right? He knew how to cut right through on sentiment, and he knew the electorate. He knew how to fuck them too, and that's the problem, which is, like I said, the right know how to do these things, and the left are idiots. So they don't know how to use it because and we fall for the trap time and time and time again, which is the wedge politics. So with the Children Overboard Affair, the government base and the media, you're going to see that history repeats, and history, it's basically the same strategy and tactics. This is why focusing on the tactics is actually better than focusing on the idea or the ideology, because you start to see it. So what happened was that there was footage, if I remember correctly, okay? If I misspeak on the facts here, I'm trying to just get to the point. But basically, there was video footage of a bunch of so basically what happened was at the knowing the pressure to not have immigration, to border control, all of that sort of bullshit, right? There was this thing where we'd put because people would often, obviously you can only arrive in Australia by boat, like if you're trying to get here, okay? So basically, boat patrols and border control, all that sort of stuff. Basically, he just said we're not having any immigration because he wanted to appeal to that base of Pauline Hanson supporters because they were a large voting bloc, okay? Again, angry working class people who were blaming the wrong fucking people. Again, it's fine. But, I mean, obviously, the policy outcome is not fine, but this is what I've been talking about for weeks, which is that, what you do matters, and you got to know who you're serving. It's the same theme. So what happened was so there was footage of here you go, video footage that was short, and it showed children going over the boat into the sea. Okay, I think one of the boats sank because I hadn't, just don't correct me, but Google the Tampa affair. What's important is what came out of that, which was that the Liberal government, coalition, Conservatives, spun that basically to say, oh, well, they shouldn't have come here, okay? We're strong on border control, all that sort of stuff. But what it did was they built a narrative to make the ALP look like soft touches, look like flip-floppers. So what they did was, this is what you're seeing this over and over again now on Twitter, which is there's a 30-second video. The right make a claim what happened, and if you say, well, I want to see the rest of that footage, what happened, they go, oh, are you weak or something? You weak, you pussy. Fucking, why don't you argue more politely? And you go, no, that's propaganda. You're wrong. Don't be an idiot. Right? It's the same fucking playbook over and over again. And it puts you on the back foot. Like that's that dynamic between the right and the left that is always true, which is that the left are always on the back foot because the left knows shit's complicated and the right are good at making shit fucking simple. Okay? It's their superpower. Okay? It's simplistic rhetoric that puts you on the back foot. Like saying, oh yeah, we're all just responsible for ourselves. That sounds simple, doesn't it? But a lefty going, well, actually, it depends on environment. You look like a fucking pussy. You look like that's the whole mechanism for that dynamic, which is why I also just call people fuckwits and also say, you're wrong, and that's okay. I don't need to be polite to you. That's a lot of the rationale for why a lot of the left go, fuck it, there's no point talking to you because I know what you're doing. So this is a known thing, but it's also not something that we learn from. So with Tampa, they manufactured this idea. So again, in the wake of the Afghanistan war, in the wake of all of these things like 9/11, anti-Muslim sentiment was at an all-time high. You had this political base of 10% of people who were upset. Pauline Hanson's base. John Howard said, cynically put the opposition leader Kim Beazley in, who is also, I mentioned him yesterday when I was talking about Mark McGowan. Mark McGowan used to work for Kim Beazley. Good guy, all that sort of stuff. Put Kim on the back foot on TV and basically called him a flip-flopper and all of this stuff. And basically what happened was that John Howard managed to tap into that angry anti-Muslim sentiment, position Kim Beazley as weak and a flip-flopper and indecisive and unable to run the economy, and they won on a narrative. And this is when, like, the Howard government were absolutely fucking unpopular in the lead up to the election. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you can't look at the current Morrison government and think that they're going to lose, because the tactics tell me, and the fact that this Pauline Hanson thing is going exactly as I expected it would, which is that it's doing the exact same thing with critical theory. Okay, which is this woke critical theory fucking indoctrination narrative, and cancel culture is something that taps into the working class anger, okay, and taps into people's grievances, and they're blaming the left and they're blaming the ALP, and what's going to happen is that there will be some event that's manufactured that feeds that narrative and loses the election. I know it, because they never fucking learn. And it's like, okay, and there's some stuff that people they take for granted, which is that generally people don't vote in parties, they vote out the government, right? And that is true, partially. But the problem with this cancel culture stuff and this critical theory boogeyman and, all of this other stuff, right, is that it's online. We don't have control over the messaging, because all of that, they've absolutely got a fucking campaign ready to go on this thing that happened today with Jessica Rowe. I'll tell you now, they've got a campaign going. You won't see it, but it'll be targeted at people. And that's what it's like, cancel culture. And I'll show you exactly. I'm going to show it plays out exactly the way that I expect it to. And that's why I open this with, do the left want to fucking win? Or are they fucking double agents who don't? I mean, yeah, they're Murdoch journos, so they probably have an interest in electing like the coalition. But at the same time, people need to be aware of what the fuck they're doing and supporting. Okay, so with Tampa, so what he did was he basically positioned the Labor Party on the back foot. Now, this happens every time. So when the GFC hit, Labor was in government. The Liberals successfully drove that wedge again, which somehow, because most people don't know, unfortunately, Labor's suffered from bad timing, but they actually softened the edges of the GFC in Australia economically. Like, we did a lot better than we should have because of the stimulus. But basically, again, they go, oh, well, they tapped into that sort of PTSD from Keating and the first recession and used the GFC to then tap into sentiment to go, to discredit Labor. They also used Julia, the most insane misogyny you've ever seen with our first female prime minister, to make her look like a fucking, oh my God, that was a vile part of political history. I'm going to move on. That's a whole other thing. But basically, they just cynically managed to tap into the worst impulses in people to cynically win government. But they keep winning. And this is the thing that Labor keep missing. They over and over and over again, they get on the back foot. They don't stand up to it. Now, the one thing, and it's still viral, it is still popular, because it was the one thing that we said, yes, okay. So Julia Gillard became powerful for a while because she stood up to Tony Abbott and she stood up to them and she called them out on their misogyny, okay? It was extremely popular. And this is, again, there's something that we don't learn from, which is that standing up to this stuff is what wins. And the problem is that the Liberals are actually the ones who They're just so good at positioning themselves as the victim and as the good guys and as the people who are not, orchestrating all of this stuff behind the scenes, that the ALP end up on the back foot every single time, and this has happened again. So today, Pauline Hanson, she's an interesting figure actually. She's very there's a lot of history there, but with that, you know how I mentioned that please explain thing, right? Some people would be humiliated. Okay, she wasn't. She owned it, and she said, "Yeah, they know they're making fun of me. Of course they're going to do that. Yeah, fuck them." And people loved her for it. She wore gaudy outfits that were out of date. She had, she was just offensive to the upper middle class. Okay, and she knew it. And she, again, from a branding point of view, she's very savvy. Okay, again, I don't know if it's deliberate. I think it was just, perfect timing. But what happened, okay, is that she became such a threat. So basically what happened was that the Liberal governments, they used Pauline Hanson's base and tried to appeal to her base, okay, to pass policy that was further and further right-wing. It was anti-immigration. It was pro-detention centres. Now, yes, the ALP voted along with this. So they were both trying to win that block back by appealing to their worst selves. And this is where we're walking into the same trap. So what happened was that by the 2001 election, this was the election that John Howard was supposed to lose. But by stoking the flames of that racist shit, he won. Okay, he turned it around. John Howard was despised. Okay, but they thought he was a statesman in comparison to Kim Beazley in the wake of 9/11 and all of that sort of stuff. And people forget about this. The memories, well, first of all, because most of them are fucking idiots and too young. And second of all, they just don't bother reading history. But what happened there, and what was clever about it, was that what they did was they just gradually shifted everyone to the right, used the one nation, used, again, what was working class fucking anger and legitimate fucking anger, and again, wrong targets, wrong solution, wrong answer, based on the data they had. The data had gaps in it, okay? This is, you can see the thing. People's data has gaps unless again, and this is the gap in data. Now, which is that people don't understand this. Anyway, so what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so in 2001, basically they just so she was a one-term wonder in the Queensland in the 2001 election. So basically they used redistribution. So they basically redistributed her seat in a way that she wouldn't win. They then did everything in their power to basically make it so that she wouldn't win. Okay, now that's really fucking cynical. Tony Abbott, who turned out to be our, Prime Minister, that's the snaky Prime Minister that, first of all, our female Prime Minister stood up to in the famous misogyny speech, and also was, oh my God. Anyway, I could go on for ages about Tony Abbott. Prick. Anyway, but basically the history there is really important because it's that same wedge happening again. We're seeing it. I think Morrison's about to win the unwinnable election again, based on this critical theory boogeyman. So, but anyway, go back. So Pauline Hanson got out of, but basically they tried to get anything on her. So criminal charges. She even spent 11 days in prison for charges that were ultimately, overturned on appeal. Again, they went after her. The establishment went after her, but she's just kept getting more and more famous. And then because she, again, even me, as a person, I think she's I don't agree with her. I don't like what she does, but I think that she thinks she's doing the right thing. Most people do. But she just kept getting more and more famous. Now the mainstream media love her. They have her on all of these things. She was on Dancing with the Stars. She makes fun of herself. She actually ran again under the Please Explain party, which is just making fun of herself. She owns it. And this is what Mark McGowan has done successfully with this government, is that he knows how to appeal to that base, which is being able to take the piss out of yourself, being able to laugh at yourself, okay? Now, who do we know who are absolutely unable to laugh at themselves, okay? Who has a lot of power and are unable to laugh at themselves, unable to relate to people outside of their bubble. Like, it's just like they've just set up the fucking shot and it's just hit it. Like, it's crazy. So anyway, so Pauline Hanson, so basically what happened today was that Jessica Rowe, a journalist and like TV presenter, who I would actually argue has a smaller audience than Pauline Hanson. So there is some interesting brain flips where they're like, why are you giving her a platform? It's like, well, hang on. Maybe Pauline Hanson's audience is of interest to Jessica too, and maybe there's a shared learning that can happen there where like strategically speaking, there's another argument, which is that the more Pauline Hanson is treated as friendly by the people that she's supposedly fighting, that narrative of her being persecuted goes away, especially when the government of in 2001 and beyond have been relentlessly fucking harassing and bullying her and even put her in prison. Like, fucking hell, like, this is the history of it. And every time, so Jessica Rowe had Pauline Hanson on a podcast, and then some woke fuck complained that she shouldn't be giving a platform to racists, because we all know that that's the real fucking problem, is who gets on whose podcast and says naughty words and can't laugh at themselves and can't see the bigger picture, which is that the narrative that has happened over 20 years with Pauline Hanson is that she is oppressed, she is persecuted, she is fighting for the working man, and these people are the enemy, the elites are the enemy, and this is that feeding that narrative. So when you turn around and try to get her cancelled, you feed the cancel culture fucking narrative that the right already have their creative assets for. I would guarantee that political campaign is running as we fucking speak. And this is what people don't get. You fucking fools. So I saw this conversation and I was like, well, first of all, I don't think Jessica Rowe is giving Pauline Hanson a platform. I think Pauline Hanson is giving Jessica Rowe a platform. And that's nothing against Jessica Rowe. It's not shade or sass. It's just a fact. Okay? Which is that when that's why you collaborate on things. Well, I don't. But, it's generally why you collaborate on things is to reach other people who are, potentially of strategic interest to you. Now, what if Jessica's idea was that she might reach them with left-wing politics and understand that, yeah, maybe she understands what I understand, which is that if you make yourself your friendly face to these guys, that they might listen to more of what you've got to say. Isn't it funny how these cunts, and I'm going to call them cunts because I'm like bringing the bogan today, these blue chicks, where they're like, my politics is extraordinarily complicated. It's complicated. Like, we've got to negotiate with companies for inclusion and diversity. We've got to ask, we've got to lean in. We must lean in at all costs. We have to negotiate and negotiate unions away. We have to negotiate the award away. We have to negotiate legislation. We have to make compromises. In order to throw the working class under the bus, we've got to make compromises. Well, what if every working class person who likes Pauline Hanson doesn't like her racism, but they like the rest of it? You've got to make compromises. Maybe they don't like everything. Maybe your unpalatable politics is actually punching down and theirs is punching up. What about that? Hadn't thought of that, had you? You hadn't thought of that because you don't think. But your politics is nuanced and complicated, and you are the hero of the story. You're not the person with power disenfranchising the one voice in politics that fucking has pretty consistently spoken for everyone outside the fucking Melbourne CBD. Effectively. I know some do, but I'm saying effectively. Representing that pain 30 years ago, the trauma, the generational fucking bait and switch that happened economically to Gen X. Anyway. And now it's the millennials telling Gen X to fucking shut up. Go fuck yourself. So anyway. So basically what happened was Jessica caved. and apologised and said, no, I shouldn't have done that. Now, their criticism was that you shouldn't put a friendly face on it. You should challenge her. But another thing I'm guessing, another perspective on that is if you challenge her, again, you don't understand the fucking dynamics. And for all these people that are assessing every little interaction, every word, they're fucking media studies grads and they like focus on semiotics. They're not very good at it, which is the optics of feeding into the very idea that Pauline Hanson has been condescended, mocked, but ridiculed, you know, all these things for her entire politics. She's a fucking senator. And she's been ridiculed, mocked, you know, made fun of, talked down to. And maybe Jessica's thinking was, well, I'm not going to feed that persecution story. I'm not going to feed that. I'm going to treat her as an equal and maybe her base will listen to what I've got to say. But no one thinks about that fucking thought, do they? Because Twitter knows best. And these woke fucks who are way out of control and getting on my tits, frankly, and are going to cost Labor the election if they don't fucking address it and confront it, which is that Pauline Hanson is a fucking senator. Oh, show some respect for a start. Doesn't matter who she is. She's a fucking senator. Second of all, she's, you know, if you don't like her politics, then don't feed the narrative that keeps getting her elected, which is that she's a victim of the system, because she has been a victim of the fucking system. She was a woman. Here you go, let's switch the narrative. She was a female politician who was an outsider, who was basically fucking persecuted by all of the white men in charge. Where's that narrative when it fucking suits you? Female outsider. And again, I'm saying you get to choose kindness. You get to choose whether you are horrible. You can rationalize kindness. You can rationalize hate. And I choose to rationalize being kind and charitable and not rationalize my own fucking hatred through like and pretending that it's kindness. Okay? Fucking hell. But I'm just saying it's all about how you spin it, but also about the narrative. Again, for all these supposed fucking experts in semiotics and fascism and what this is, and they're endorsed by Twitter and they're blue checks and they're the experts. They know all about optics and political campaigns. They're political commentators at Triple J. They know everything because she's a racist. Yeah, she is. But guess what? Also, you stepping in and cancelling her gets her elected. You dumb fucks. So anyway, I'm going to share. Oh, hang on. Let me show you what happened today. Let me show you the news. Exactly what you'd expect. There's no surprises. Any surprises? No surprises. No. Here we go. So, here we go. Woke kicks in. And I swear to God, if I was the coalition campaigner, I'd just like, are these guys paid by a fucking coalition to hand the election to them? This is so fucking, obviously, this is how you go, this is, nobody who is good at left-wing politics does this. Can white journalists stop giving Pauline Hanson a fucking sympathetic platform, please? Oh, no. Okay. Guess what happens? Guess what happens? Ding, 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 ding. Any guesses? Any guesses? Any guesses? Any guesses? Hang on. We need this. Hang on. We need it, bro. Any guess? News.com.au, Daily Mail, Worldwide, Daily Telegraph, Murdoch Rags, Murdoch Rags, Murdoch Rags. Here we go. Spectator. There you go. News.com.au, 2GB, Talkback. Cancel culture narrative. Well done. You've played straight into the fucking hands of the people who have ready-made assets on a campaign, on a targeted Facebook campaign, and to build an email list so that they can then target that email list when we have an election and then put Labor on a back foot with the trans boogeyman or the fucking gender shit, or make them say that women have a cervix, and they lose the election in a fucking, the unlosable election. And it will be their own fault. And this is what I see happening. Now, I am optimistic. Let's just say I'm optimistic. Okay. Did that come back? It did. Yeah. Sorry, my monitor's behind the camera. I'm optimistic. I don't know if it's going to happen because they're full. They've done it. Done it again. Done it again. And they've been setting the scene for fucking months. And you can't tell me that they don't know what they're doing. Okay. This is what's going to happen. And the ALP are like, yeah, okay. You need, like, what the fuck? And again, I know that the woke journos don't represent the ALP, but I'm saying that what happens is that they're giving, that this is what we're up against campaign-wise, is that it's a whole ecosystem of media caused by one dumb fuck who couldn't let it go for 2 fucking seconds. Is pedestrian owned by Murdoch? That's what I'd like to know. Because a lot of these woke publications are owned by Murdoch. And guess what Murdoch wants? Guess what Rupert Murdoch wants? Yeah. Fucking morons. And I hope that the ALP are aware of this stuff. I hope that they're aware that this is, that I hope that when they are pushed on these button issues and these fucking Triple J idiot political commentators who are 22 years old who don't know what the fuck. How the fuck do you get to be a political commentator at the public broadcaster and not know anything about fucking politics? This is how politics works. How do you not know that this is the exact same formula that was used with Tampa? Oh yeah, because she was 5. And they've just, no anti-imperialist fucking pro-war person ever gets a fucking gig there. Nobody who actually knows how this playbook works is allowed to call it out, because then you might upset the fucking trans. Or you might be impolite to the big pharma campaign behind the scenes. And again, it's not about the trans issue. It's about the fact that that's been weaponized too, to make everyone quiet and give employers, it just falls into this right-wing conservative, like neoliberal fucking economic rationalism thing that makes the left look fucking crazy. Like we eat that same narrative that we are divided and disorganized. We eat our own. We can't fucking, we're idiots. We're radical, all that bullshit. And like, meanwhile, 40% of the normal, rational, organized left working class people are left out. Because there's this whole right-wing ecosystem, and they are. The wokes are fucking right-wing. There's this whole right-wing media ecosystem that hands elections time after time after time to the far right. And the Democrats in the US are the far right. They hand it to the Tories in the UK. Look what's happening with UK Labour. This has happened like literally this week. Do you think they have any chance of winning an election now? When you fracture it's not that they're fractured. It's not that anyone agrees with it. It's that it's a wedge issue that has gasoline poured on it by the right. And it's like, until you stand up and say, no, I know what you're doing. I see what this is. This is a wedge issue. This is Tampa fucking 2.0. I'm not doing it. And you tell the economic truth. You acknowledge the history of what happened in the 90s. You acknowledge that this fucking neoliberal shit is a failed experiment. You acknowledge that Whitlam was right, but you got fucking eroded over time. You acknowledge that Paul Keating was fucking bad for the company, the party. You acknowledge all of these previous mistakes. You acknowledge the fucking factional bullshit that keeps fucking firing every prime minister that can't last 3 months because there's a fucking knife in their back. And if they're a woman, Jesus Christ, they're going to receive so much fucking misogyny. Like, from within her own party, okay, like fucking clean house. Get your shit together. And this is I'm going to close with the same rhetorical question. Do we want to win? Because I don't think we do. I don't think Labor wants to win. Now, the WA Labor seem to have figured this shit out, okay, for now. They seem to understand the forces at play. And also, our Premier understands his electorate, which is probably the main driver, which is that he knows, because our Premier's electorate isn't in fucking upper class middle Sydney and Melbourne and all these like fun suburbs. He is in one of those he represents people who, generations of inequality that moved to Rockingham from the inner suburbs because they lost their house and had to buy cheaper real estate in the 90s down there, and they built new estates. He knows all of this stuff because I know that Mark's been around that long. Because I was there when when Beasley was in Brand, right? That's again, I only met him a couple of times. I was just doing leaflets and shit. But my impression of him was good. But that's the nature of the area. If you just, all you need to do is deliver on your fucking promises, be honest, be self-deprecating, and at the election, and just fucking say that women matter and that this stuff is right-wing nonsense to drive a wedge on the left for the actual people who are fighting for you, not the person who's blaming the Aboriginal people and the Muslims and all those fucking people. Pauline Hanson is a symptom, and you have just, they've with this Jessica Rowe thing, they've just fed right into, in an election year, fed right into the narrative that the ALP are cancelling everybody because, again, Rupert Murdoch fucking hates the Labor Party. They've declared war on him, and it's a fucking war. And if they don't see this for what it is, which is planted fucking outrage that is designed to wedge us in the same way they did Tampa, we're doomed. We're doomed. I hope Labor start fucking pull their head in and know that this is coming. Know that that bomb's coming, and when that bomb hits, I'm sure that you'll go, oh yeah, Taya said that it happened. Watch it. It's interesting. But I'd like to win. I'd like to have a house. I'd like to have healthcare. I'd like to have not be subjected to institutional abuse, cheered on by these blue check fucks they are using, I've said this before, they're weaponizing the very system they claim is oppressive. They're using their institutional power and institutional against people who don't have institutional power. They're the problem. They're the bullies. They're not the victims. They can go fuck themselves. And I'll tell you now that the Aboriginal people who live in Pauline Hanson's electorate, yeah, a lot of them are demonised, but, again, that's why she's also got support from them, because a lot of their pain is class-based. And they hate the blue checks. They hate those people. So every time you demonise them, you feed the same, you give them the same, you give them more data to make the wrong fucking conclusion and build a poor correlation, not a causation, which is institutional abuse caused by economic rationalism that has been gradually eroded every fucking decent institution that we had, that has completely and utterly eroded all of our national identity and all of our fucking everything that was good about Australia that was put in by Whitlam and Hawke is now gone. And it will continue to be eroded if you don't fucking pull your heads in. We're turning into, it's just, anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. I've gone too long. I think I got there in the end. A little bit disorganized, but anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. If you want to become a patron, because I'm going to start talking a lot more about this stuff. I'm setting up a paid newsletter too, which is basically going to be, I'm not news, but, my hot takes on things and a few resources, a bit of like concept, fewer theory, just a newsletter that's a bit more structured and educational and that sort of stuff, to help keep you away from the news for a start, and also just to get a better take on this stuff, I hope. I'm not claiming to be the truth. I've got my own, obviously I've got, I'm coming at this from the left, but the world's hurting for real left-wing analysis of this stuff. That is charitable also to, these forces. So I'm going to go. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. You can become a patron if you want. I would like that. But again, I know everyone's hurting, so whatever. I want the people who fuck this up to pay me. I want the rich people to pay me. I want the Labor Party to fucking pay me $1 million to fucking win them the election. But they won't, because they're fucking idiots. They're going to hire some Sydney advertising agency that walks right into the trap because they think that going woke is going to win. And it's actually not. going to lose the election. Anyway, it's a right-wing weapon that feeds a narrative. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. At least you've got me. Oh, God. Do you know what? I would like to give Pauline Hanson a platform. I think I will gift her my vast platform just so that people hear me. But anyway, I'm going to go. Bye.